Let me start by first setting the context of this presentation. So, I am a 62-year-old Hindu. Until about my 55th or 56th year, my exposure to Hinduism was restricted to certain rituals which I had got exposed to in my childhood, like chanting some shlokas at home, visiting the neighborhood temple, participating in some pujas on important festivals at home or outside. And it was only about 7, 8 years back, I think 2018-19, when I started um, consuming and assimilating content in the form of books and podcasts by eminent scholars on subjects like Upanishads, Vedanta, um, commentaries on various interpretations of the Bhagavad Gita, so on and so forth, that it struck me that what I had missed all along, and how much better my life could have been if I had studied and internalized the key messages of Sanatan Dharma philosophy in my 20s and 30s. How much more successful I could have been in my career, in my human relationships, and how much less stressful and anxious, and how much more peaceful and joyful this whole journey till now could have been. That said, this presentation is not about what I missed as a young man, but it's more about what I see a significant section of the Hindu youth today, particularly those from slightly affluent English educated backgrounds, seem to be missing and losing forever, and how most of us seem to be only watching this unfold in front of us quite helplessly, and also explore whether we as a society can do something to buck this trend. So, we will approach this presentation in two sections. In section A, we will speak about why it's critically important for all of us to go beyond rituals, to at least get a basic understanding of the core Hindu philosophy. And in section B, we will try and provide some broad answers to some typically teasing questions which I would say ignorant critics of Hinduism often pose, and which surprisingly most Hindus struggle to answer. Uh, and also, we'll touch upon some key messages of the Hindu philosophy, which will demonstrate why Hinduism is so much more than just being a religion, like Ramesh was saying earlier on. So, the world of Hinduism can also be viewed in three parts. There is this religious part, which I spoke about, which consists of rituals, pujas, havans, temple visits, even if you're lighting a diya in your house. And then you have the spiritual part. The spiritual part actually offers us some profound insights, into deeper topics like what is the purpose of life, how does this universe work, what is the relationship between us and the universe, the functioning of our minds, the mysteries of the mind. Uh, this part is very sophisticated and intellectually very stimulating. And then we have the way of life part, which gives us suggested duties, do's and don'ts, ethics, right conduct, all of them designed towards character building, man making, and how to create a harmonious and progressive society. The religious part, could vary from community to community, from geography to geography, often from home to home. The other two parts, though, spiritual and the way of life part, has some truly precious gems which are absolutely timeless. They are as relevant today as they were thousands of years back when they were perhaps first conceived, and likely to be relevant thousands of years hence from here also. Unfortunately, though, there is not much of knowledge about this. This part is almost like a user manual, a toolkit of how you could lead a successful and happy life. And as I said, sadly, most Hindus are ignorant about this. They are content to stay within the comfort of rituals. And in my view, as a consequence, a sizable section of our youth is actually drifting away from Hinduism. Now, just so that you don't get me wrong, I'm not against rituals. I think most of the rituals which are practiced, they have, to the extent that they can give us comfort and security and peace of mind, they are all very useful. So what is this section of the youth that we are talking about? I live in an upper middle class neighborhood of Bangalore called Rajajinagar, Malleshwaram. I live in an apartment complex which has 1,000+ apartments. And this is a section that I keep bumping into regularly. So how do we profile this? So, this section is typically in its late teens, early 20s, or perhaps even late 20s. And they are products of reputed schools and colleges, reputed educational institutions. And this section is also keen to be seen as modern and liberal. So these are two labels they really like to own. But the problem is that they confuse being Western as being modern. And if you're religious, they would quickly conclude that you have to be very conservative in your thinking. You cannot be liberal in your outlook. So they confuse liberalism with being irreligious, being atheistic. So if you're clad in, say, a dhoti and wearing a tilak, you have no chance of being seen either as modern in your thinking or liberal in your thinking. And this section is also defensive about, their Hindu identity. They are uncomfortable wearing Hindu symbols on their person. And somehow they have got conditioned and programmed to see Hinduism only as patriarchal, where women are not treated properly, exploited, and Hinduism is seen more as regressive and not progressive, full of superstitions. And perhaps most problematically, they feel Hinduism is totally irrelevant in their own life journey. So, since they feel it's totally irrelevant, they're utterly disinterested. And when someone is utterly disinterested, it's very difficult to engage with them on the subject. Now, the disconnect of this section with Hinduism is actually growing. And while part of it is organic because, there is increasing westernization across the world, some part of it may also be because of a deliberate social engineering project. I'm speaking about the fast spread of the far left wokeism philosophy, which is spreading through our internet and OTT content. In case you're not, you have not heard of these terms, like what is far left philosophy, what is woke philosophy, I would suggest you Google it. So the philosophy teaches you many things. Amongst that, it also teaches you that it is very uncool to take pride in your cultural, religious, or national identity, or even family identity. So you're discouraged from taking pride in these identities. And this has spread quite wide, quite fast in the developed world, especially in North America and Western Europe. And it is now sneaking into India through some of our elite and good English medium schools. And also, like I said, through internet and OTT platforms. In fact, it has caused great discomfort amongst parents of school and college going children in places like California and Western Europe, where, especially parents who want to retain some sort of tradition and family values within their households. Now, we can ask the question that why should all this really bother us? Because after all, our lives may well be going on fine. And even in the developed West, in North America, in Western Europe, people are increasingly moving away from religion. In fact, one of the recent surveys said that the fastest growing religion in North America and Western Europe is quote unquote no religion. So if some section of our youth is following suit, what is the big deal? Why should we bother about this? We could well ask that question. I feel that's extremely flawed thinking, because what we are at risk of losing here is not just a religion, it's something much bigger than a religion. Something which could be a ticket to our success and happiness, not only in our lives, but also in the lives of our future generations. So something truly precious may be getting lost forever to our children, grandchildren, and near and dear ones. And if you're not vigilant enough, you may not notice it could well be happening in your close circles, within your family circles, and if you're not very well connected to the youngsters in your family. And I see that this trend amongst this section that I'm talking about is likely to worsen progressively. And over the next couple of decades, I see this impacting our social and cultural fabric significantly in ways that we will not like. And one outcome that we are almost certain to see is quite a few Hindu youngsters in our upper middle class society may be faced with what I call an identity crisis, where they are unsure about where they really belong, and they are struggling to fit into certain other groups. Now, let me elaborate. This is something I noticed during my visits to the US and Europe over the last 2 or 3 years, where when I interacted with quite a few Hindu youngsters who are there either pursuing their higher studies or doing a job and pursuing their career. And what I found amongst them was that they were very keen to play down their Indian identity, even more so their Hindu identity, and they were really trying to win acceptance amongst the locals. And that acceptance was not coming easily. And that is such a sad mindset to be in, because when you are in the grip of such a defensive mindset, you are very likely to end up as an obedient follower rather than a confident leader. So this could, damage the society in the days to come. So how do we see this problem? Is it something we can do something about? Or are we ourselves a part of this problem? For this, I have a quick check. So let me present some sample questions which critics of Hinduism often pose, and which surprisingly most Hindus struggle to answer. If you can answer these questions logically in a convincing manner, then you're fine. But if you cannot, you're certainly a part of the problem. So questions like, how can Hindus believe in the concept of multiple gods? Do we really believe that there is a world of gods out there where there are a lot of gods interacting with each other? And how can the Hindu imagination of God be so unreal? Elephant head on a human body, man with 10 heads. Seriously? And then we see, Hindu gods are presented as though they marry amongst themselves, they produce children, they die like human beings. Is that not weird? And what about the Hindu practice of giving gifts to gods? Are our gods corrupt? You give them a coconut and the god will grant you your wish? And leave all this aside. What about caste? Does Hinduism not discriminate between people based on caste? And then perhaps the most important question. Okay, how is Hinduism relevant in our lives? How is it relevant in our quest for success and happiness? Now, these questions pertain to very elementary aspects of the Hindu philosophy. And if we are unable to answer this logically, it means that we have not even started taking our first baby steps to understanding Hindu philosophy. But, we are not entirely to blame for this, because right from childhood, our exposure to Hinduism has been only through rituals like, pujas and temple visits and so on and so forth. For generations, not only today's generation, even the previous, my generation and a few generations before, 80-90% of Hindus have neglected getting into Hinduism's deeper philosophy. And there is a reason for this, because while today we may be a middle income country, till recently, a few decades back, if we go before the economic liberalization of 1990s, we were, thanks to the colonial rule, we were a highly impoverished society with very few opportunities, and the focus was overwhelmingly on finding livelihoods. And there was just no time or space for deep thought and philosophy. Now, let me give you my own example. I was born into a family of 10 members, me, my parents, and 7 siblings, all of them sisters. My father worked in a private firm, did reasonably well, but poor man, he struggled to give us anything more than basics. And it was clear to me from very early on that he could not have afforded my admission into a medical or engineering college. So I realized that the only way I can get professionally qualified is by being a chartered accountant or CA, because the CA program was very inexpensive. But the flip side was that the success rate was very, very low. Only 4 or 5 out of 100 would clear the CA exams. So imagine my state of mind before every exam. I was petrified, as if it's do or die for me. And in that fearful state, when my mother would tell me, go to the nearby temple or chant this shloka, I would accept it without any questions. So almost every ritual or religious practice that came my way during that phase, I accepted without any questions. So religious rituals actually served as crutches to handle our fears and insecurities. That situation has changed. The insecurities are much lesser for today's youth, and the need for crutches is also much less, especially in the slightly affluent sections of our society. So how should we understand the environment in which today's youth finds itself in? In most households, I would say middle class, upper middle class and above, the core basics like basic food, basic shelter, basic clothing, etc. is already taken care of considerably for most young people. And the career options are far more. So naturally, the insecurities are less. And when you're confident, you're secure, what happens? You look for logic and relevance, and you reject anything that does not make sense to you. So rejection rates are very high. And what's also happened is, it's become a globalized world. Internet has made the whole world into a village. For example, it's not uncommon for me these days when a North Indian friend of mine calls me to check whether I have seen the latest Mohanlal movie. This was inconceivable 10 or 20 years back. So the world has become a village. And so cultural lines have blurred. And then what I spoke about earlier, the far left woke friendly content, which is getting fed to our youth through internet and OTT platforms. So in this situation, when we have to engage our youth, we need reason more than rituals. So let us sum up section A. Why do we need, all of us need to go beyond rituals and at least get a basic hang of the Hindu philosophy, the core Sanatana Dharma philosophy? Because the questions which I posed, or there could be more questions like that, these are all valid and legitimate questions. They merit credible answers, proper answers. We can't just brush them under the carpet. if you do that, then you come across as illogical to the youth of today. And these questions can come from anyone, from your near and dear ones today and from your children and grandchildren tomorrow. And if you are a practicing Hindu, if you're doing anything, even like simple things like lighting a diya in your puja every day or visiting the nearby temple, but cannot answer these questions convincingly, then whatever you are practicing comes across as mere superstition to people who are watching you. Then you become a bad example. The youth feels you are regressive, superstitious, illiberal, bigoted, and that's how you become part of the problem, contributing to the decline of Hinduism, not only in your families, but also in our society. And this is so ironic because if you read our scriptures, like Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, it's all in question answer form between a student and a teacher, and often the student disagrees with the teacher. So they seem to almost urge all of us to become questioning seekers rather than blind followers. But unfortunately, when we prefer the comfort of blind faith as opposed to the challenge of being a questioning seeker, we are weakening the very tradition that we wish to preserve. So that's section A for you. We will now move to section B. And in section B, we will try and provide some broad answers because we don't have the time for detailed discussions, broad answers to some of those teasing questions, which I said critics of Hinduism often pose and which surprisingly Hindus struggle to answer. And also we'll touch upon some messages which will demonstrate why Hinduism is far bigger than just a mere religion. So we'll start with this question. How can Hindus accept the concept of multiple gods? As if, there's a separate world of gods out there. This is actually wrong. At its core, the Hindu philosophy speaks of one supreme, omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient God called Brahman, who is formless. But the problem with a formless God is that common folks like you and me cannot relate to a formless God. We need the forms to connect with the divine. And this is particularly useful in the early initial stages of a person's spiritual journey. A truly evolved spiritual person may not require the forms anymore in his journey. And then these forms also help in Bhakti Marga. So let me explain. According to Hinduism, the purpose of life is to attain a state of bliss or ananda, which is a state of ultimate and lasting happiness, inner peace and joy, which cannot easily be shaken by any external event or external trigger. And one of the paths Hinduism recommends you can use to reach that state of bliss is the path of bhakti or pure and selfless love. The problem with pure and selfless love is it's not very easy. Most human beings are not capable of pure and selfless love. In fact, almost in all our relationships, there is some give and take. If you take away that give and take from any relationship, even some relationships that we consider very close may actually collapse. That is a disturbing thought. But the good news is that our scriptures say that you can actually train yourself to become capable of pure and selfless love. And that is where Bhakti Marga, Bhakti, which is the ultimate stage of love, that is where Bhakti Marga and Bhakti Yoga come into play. In fact, the Hindu concept of Ishta Devata or personal God is so unique, where you choose a form that appeals to you, whose stories appeal to you the most, and then you gradually nurture and grow your love for it through using various Bhakti Marg techniques. That said, all this does not change the core message of Hinduism that God is one. In fact, the Upanishads are very clear. Ekam Sat Vipara Bahuda Vadanti, which loosely translates to God is one and there could be many paths of reaching that one God. Let us look at the next question. Now, why is the Hindu imagination of God so unreal, like elephant's head on a human body? See, these fantastic forms and the even more fantastic stories help even children develop love for their Ishtadevata and personal gods. Right from childhood, it's easy to initiate even children into this journey. Tell me which child would not love to hear those fantastic stories about Lord Krishna, a young Krishna fighting the demon snake, an anaconda inside the ocean, or lifting a hill on his little finger, or vanquishing the evil Kamsa. So most of us fall in love with these stories and these forms at a very early stage in our life, and that love actually grows with age. And to this limited extent, this is not very different from adults loving Superman and Batman movies, even though they are so unreal, because many adults today have consumed comic strips involving Batman and Superman in their childhood and had fallen in love with these characters even as school-going children, and that love has remained. So, at a broad level, the forms and the stories help us to feel deeper love and connection with the divine. And what about this Hindu concept of offering gifts to God? Are our gods corrupt? Now let us get this clear. Gifts and offerings to God are meant to be given out of love, not as a transaction. So when a parent gives gifts the child either for motivation or reward, do we call it corruption? Or we say it's given out of affection or for encouragement? Likewise, when the child grows up to be successful and gives something back to the parent, do we call it corruption or given out of love and gratitude? And how do mothers express their love for their children, for their young children? They bathe the child, they bathe the baby, they dress it up, they feed the child. The same way, what we do to the idols, we bathe the idols, we decorate the idols, we offer food to the idols. They are all expressions of love and devotion. And these offerings are meant to cultivate and grow the emotion of pure and selfless love within us. It is for our inner transformation. That said, like in most cases, some people, either out of ignorance or vested interest, might not have imbibed this spirit and they may be distorting this practice. So, if you study the Hindu philosophy, you will understand that offerings to God are not about transaction between you and God. It is more about your own inner transformation and to make you capable of pure and selfless love. Then we had the question, look, how can gods marry amongst themselves, produce children, be like humans? So it's more or less similar answer. See, the Hindu scriptures are vast. At the very top, you have the Upanishads and Vedanta, Bhagavad Gita, which always speak about that one formless God or Brahman. But then you also have the Puranas. The Puranas are the ones which narrate wonderful stories about the various gods, and they humanize God so that even common people can connect with the divine. And like I said earlier, all these stories help in practice of bhakti. There's another concept here. Hindus believe in the concept of avatars, which is the concept of incarnations of God. Basically, the concept says that when evil in society crosses a particular threshold, God takes the form of a human being, vanquishes the evil to restore the balance. So, as per our philosophy, avatars are quote unquote humans who put an end to great evils, deliver major reforms, like Gautam Buddha. is revered by many Hindus as an avatar of Lord Vishnu. And avatars overcome impossible odds and challenges in ways that defy logic. So much so that people feel that they cannot be just human beings. In fact, both Rama and Krishna have been described as avatars, and both Ramayana and Mahabharata, very interestingly, have been classified in our scriptures as itihasa or history, not as fiction. So we need to understand that the stories are deeply symbolic. They carry powerful messages. Not all of them always need to be taken literally. And then what about caste? Does Hinduism not discriminate between people based on caste? If you study the Upanishads and Bhagavad Gita, you will agree with me that the original intention of the Varna system, the caste system, seems more to steer people into occupations and professions they are most suited to based on their qualities and nature, innate nature, gunas and prakriti. For example, Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, verse 13, specifically says that Varna is based on one's qualities and actions. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 5, verse 18, says that there should be no hierarchy between the Varnas. Nothing is superior or inferior. All of them have to be viewed equally. Mahabharata goes one step further, says birth and ancestry cannot be the basis for determining caste. That said, over time, vested interests have distorted, twisted, used, abused, misused this practice to further certain privileges they were enjoying across future generations without discharging their duties. And that has definitely resulted in discrimination. And this area needed reforms. Quite a bit of reforms have been done. More needs to be done. So my view is the philosophy does not support discrimination. Its misinterpretation and misuse does. And finally, the more important question, how is, okay, all this is fine. How is Hinduism relevant in our lives, in our quest for success and happiness? After all, what do we all want? We all do not want misery or dukkha. We all want happiness or sukha. So can Hinduism help us stay happy? 100%, absolutely. According to Hinduism, your ticket to happiness is by mastering your mind. And the mismanagement of your mind is the main reason for all your miseries, your ill health, your failures. In fact, I tell you, this is borne out, at least in my own journey when I look back. You know, in my life, I've had a few hits and successes as well as several flops and misses. And when I analyze those flops and misses where I fell short of expectations, almost always it was because I could not manage my mind properly in a given set of circumstances. Hinduism emphasizes the need to work on our minds, and through specific techniques like meditation and mindfulness, which is referred to as Sakshi Bhava or witnessing the mind. This is very interesting because today mindfulness is such a big thing in almost all Fortune 500 companies, be it Google, SAP, LinkedIn, Salesforce, Ford. They all have mindfulness workshop. They believe enhanced mindfulness results in a more harmonious work environment, more productive work environment. And when you read our scriptures and realize that the concept of mindfulness was thought about and analyzed in so much detail by our forefathers thousands of years back, you can't help feeling a sense of pride. The Hindu philosophy makes a clear distinction between mind or manas and intellect or buddhi. Mind is a seat for heightened emotions, high excitement, anger, ego, jealousy, arrogance, whereas intellect helps you distance yourself from this place of high emotion, evaluate things with a calm mind, and discriminate between what is right and wrong in any given situation. And no wonder Hinduism says it is the intellect that should control the mind and not the other way around. So what is the prescription of Hindu philosophy for success and happiness? An alert intellect with a calm mind. That is a magic formula. And like in all other aspects, the Hindu philosophy does not stop with just giving you a prescription. It gives you an array of techniques to reach that state of an alert intellect and a calm mind. So Hinduism is clearly not just a religion. It's a science of the mind. Let us explore it through one more slide. Some key messages from our scriptures. According to Hinduism, the purpose of life, like I said earlier, is to attain a state of bliss or ananda, which is a state of ultimate and lasting happiness, inner happiness and peace, which cannot be disturbed by anything external. So Hinduism says that your happiness comes from within you, depends only on you, and not on anything external. So that message is actually very empowering. Like I said earlier, mastering your mind is the single biggest factor behind your success and happiness. And what does the karma theory teach us? That we shape our future. If our past actions have shaped our present, it's only logical that our today's actions will shape our tomorrow. So in essence, we shape our tomorrow. That again is a very empowering message. And the Maya theory, what does it say? That don't go by hearsay, don't go by what meets the eye, peel the layers, get into the depth for all your decisions. And then I would like to highlight verses 1 to 4 in chapter 14 of the Bhagavad Gita, which speak of 26 good qualities a human being should have and 5 bad qualities a human should avoid. And what is really remarkable about these 31 qualities, 26 good plus 5 bad, are that there is hardly anything to do with God and religion. They are all about man-making, character building, and how, obviously this could result in a harmonious, productive, and progressive society. And that's why we say that Hinduism is not just a religion, it's a manual for happy living. And most importantly, what I want to highlight, we started off by saying that it's so important for Hindus to go beyond rituals. In fact, our scriptures clearly ask us to be more questioning, to be seekers rather than blind believers. In this context, I would like to highlight verse 63 from chapter 18 of the Bhagavad Gita, which goes like this: Iti te jnanamakyatam guhyat guhyataram maya vimrsheta dasheshena yathechasi tatakuru. So this comes towards the end of the Gita, where after having shared absolutely the most precious and priceless wisdom about life and universe with Arjuna, Lord Krishna tells Arjuna, hey Arjuna, what I have shared with you is the rarest of rare wisdom. Now think about it deeply, reflect on it. And then he comes with that punchline. He says, Yathechasi tathakuru, or Yatha ichchasi tathakuru, which means do as you deem fit. Just consider the beauty of this verse. Even the God in Hinduism does not expect Arjuna, a mere human, to follow his advice blindly. He says, I have told you what I think is right, but now you think about it and do as you deem right. In fact, I doubt whether you will come across a more liberal thought or more liberal value in any religious text anywhere in the world. So this timeless, precious wisdom, it's important for all of us to do something that it's not lost to the world. And we should all do our bit, and it will certainly add up. And what can one say about the Bhagavad Gita? There's so many interpretations. Each interpretation gives us priceless gems. So, suggested next steps at the end of the presentation. What do I suggest? I really urge everybody to go beyond rituals. At least get an elementary idea of the underlying philosophy of Hinduism. And start engaging with questioning minds. Let us not shirk the questions. What happens is these questions can actually challenge us. They can make us more curious. Go back to the books. And it'll only hasten our learning process. But most importantly, start your own journey of seeking and knowing. Every step, however small, is a small ticket to your success and happiness. So start the journey, ask the questions, discover the depth. And to, help a beginner get off to a good start, please allow me, with all my humility, to present my humble offering, which is my book titled Hinduism Beneath the Surface, a family's attempt to understand Sanatana Dharma. The book is designed to act as a basic introduction to beginners and young adults into the world of Hindu philosophy, going beyond rituals. And a lot of people find books on philosophy a bit dry, difficult to read. So in my humble attempt to make it an easier read, I have used the context of conversations within a modern Hindu family for each topic. This is available on Amazon. So with that, we come to the end of my presentation. Thank you all so much for your time and attention.